Welcome to Washington Today for February 3rd, 2025. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thank you for joining us. Reaction continues to come in after the Trump administration's decision to close the offices of the U.S. Agency for International Development. A group of Democratic lawmakers standing outside USAID offices called the move illegal, and that only Congress can change the agency. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he is now the agency's acting director, but that he's delegated that authority to an unnamed person. We'll hear from him, the president, and members of Congress coming up. According to several reports, the USAID shutdown came just hours after presidential advisor Elon Musk said Donald Trump had signed off on the move, and after word yesterday that Musk's White House team was given access to the Treasury Department's payment system. That access has drawn the ire of top Senate Democrats Chuck Schumer and Patty Murray. We'll hear what they have to say about it coming up as well. And a trade war with Mexico and Canada may have been averted for now, as Reuters reporting this afternoon that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that President Trump has agreed to pause new tariffs for 30 days. That agreement comes after a call this afternoon between the two leaders. At the White House, the president spoke about the USAID shutdown and said he doesn't think it needs congressional approval.
I don't know. I don't think so. No, not when it comes to fraud. If there's fraud, these people are lunatics. And if it comes to fraud, you wouldn't have an active Congress. And I'm not sure that you would anyway. But we just want to do the right thing. It's something that should have been done a long time ago. It went crazy during the Biden administration. They went totally crazy, what they were doing, and the money they were giving to people that shouldn't be getting it, and to agencies and others that shouldn't be getting it. It was a shame. So they're tremendous fraud. But we'll be doing a report. We'll be giving you that report at the appropriate time.
You know, in the first term, though, USAID was something that you liked in some respects.
I love the concept of it.
Had some program.
Sure. I love the concept, but they turned out to be radical left lunatics. And the concept of it is good, but it's all about the people.
Here are some facts about USAID from the Congressional Research Service and via the Washington Post. The agency is tasked to provide humanitarian and development assistance to other countries. It does that primarily by giving funds to non-governmental organizations, foreign governments, international organizations, and other U.S. agencies. In fiscal year 2023, USAID managed over $40 billion to 130 countries. That's less than 1% of the federal budget. The top recipients of that aid: Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia. USAID was created in 1961 by an act of Congress called the Foreign Assistance Act. That law brought several existing programs under one roof, and it grew out of the Marshall Plan. That was the U.S. effort to help Europe rebuild after World War II. More than 10,000 people work for USAID today. About two-thirds of them serve overseas. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking about today's actions.
I mean, my frustration with USAID goes back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so. So the functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. I said very clearly during my confirmation hearing that every dollar we spend and every program we fund, that will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. And USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct the sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. We're spending taxpayer money here. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. And we owe the American people the assurances that every dollar we are spending abroad is being spent on something that furthers our national interest. And so far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
Are you currently in charge of USAID? Or are you acting?
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region. That cannot continue. USAID is not an independent, non-governmental entity.
Secretary Rubio was speaking to reporters in San Salvador. Meanwhile, back here in Washington, a group of protesters led by a group of congressional Democrats talked to reporters outside USAID headquarters. Here's Senate Foreign Relations Committee member Chris Van Hollen of Maryland.
As my colleague said, it's not only a gift to our adversaries, but trying to shut down the Agency for International Development by executive order is plain illegal. It is illegal. Elon Musk may get to be dictator of Tesla, but he doesn't, and he may try to play dictator here in Washington, D.C., but he doesn't get to shut down the Agency for International Development. Now, as we're speaking at a federal court, at the district court right down the road, there's an ongoing hearing, I don't know if it's over yet, about the earlier effort of the Trump administration to stop federal grants around the country to communities and people in need. There's a stay on that, and then in Rhode Island, the Attorney General's got a TRO on that. So what you're seeing here with respect to AID is a continuing effort around those illegal actions. Now, over the weekend, I had multiple conversations with lawyers, and I want to commend all the lawyers who are working on upholding the rule of law here, including Democracy Forward, which is an organization that helped file the lawsuit pending right now in the D.C. District Court. I am confident that when they look into this, and they are looking into this, that they will also file suits to hold the Trump administration and Elon Musk accountable. This is a clear violation of our law. Finally, let me just say a word to all the men and women and employees who work with AID. Thank you for your service to the United States of America. And we have all asked the authorities at AID, we've made multiple calls, to allow us just to enter the building in AID when this press conference is over, simply to talk to the civil servants at AID, those who may be in the building. As you know, they were told not to come in. But we would like to see firsthand what is happening to this essential agency that does such good work on the American people. So to our colleagues at AID and across the government, stay strong. We have your back. We will do everything in our power in the Senate and the House to stop this outrage. And in the meantime, since we don't have many Republican colleagues who want to help us, we are doing everything we can with our colleagues through the courts to make sure that we uphold the rule of law, stop this illegal shutdown of AID, and stop the other illegal actions around the government.
And House Budget Committee member Ilhan Omar of Minnesota.
We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made. What Trump and Elon and all of their cronies are trying to do is take away the constitutional power of Congress. We get to decide. We have the power of the purse. We get to decide where money is allocated, and it's the executive's power to make sure that that money gets to where it needs to get. When we talk about civil servants being let go, what we are talking about is not saving money. It's essentially saying they can get paid while they're home and their work doesn't get done on behalf of the American people. It is us, taxpayers, who are being ripped off. It is us, taxpayers, who are not getting the resources that we paid into.
And here's House Rules Ranking Member Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. He is also co-chair of Congress's Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission.
First of all, to all the employees at USAID, thank you, thank you, thank you. You keep America safe, and you help people all around the world. And I want to apologize. I want to say I'm sorry that you have to put up with this offensive bullshit coming out of this White House.
You can see all of today's event at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. President Trump signed more executive orders today, including one that directs the Treasury and Commerce Departments to begin the process of creating a sovereign wealth fund. Forbes.com, writing about the order, calls it, quote, a state-owned fund that can invest in stocks, real estate, bonds, hedge funds, and more to build a pool of money that can be used to insulate the government from economic stressors. They go on to report, quote, details on where the money is coming from to start the fund are not known. Money within funds can be sourced from trade surpluses or a budget surplus, though the U.S. has not had a surplus in more than 2 decades, and creating it will likely require congressional approval. At today's signing event, President Trump talked about his conversation with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. The two reached an agreement to pause tariffs on Mexico for a month while they hammer out a deal to block the flow of drugs and illegal migration across the border.
Or did Mexican President Sheinbaum?
Did what?
Did you blink this morning?
There was no blinking. No, she's a wonderful woman, but she did agree to 10,000 soldiers on the border. I would say that's a lot. Would you say that's pretty good? 10,000 soldiers on the border?
Sir,
and the 10,000 soldiers are going to keep illegal aliens out, and they're going to keep them out, seriously out, and otherwise they're going to have a big penalty. Mexico's going to be penalized. They're not going to come through Mexico anymore, and they're not going to let the fentanyl come in from China. And China hopefully is going to stop sending us fentanyl, and if they're not, the tariffs are going to go substantially high.
And as we mentioned earlier, Reuters reporting late this afternoon that the president has agreed to pause any new tariffs on Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau posted on X just a few minutes ago, quote, I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I've also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together. And President Trump releasing on social media this statement, quote, Canada has agreed to ensure we have a secure northern border and to finally end the deadly scourge of drugs like fentanyl that have been pouring into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans while destroying their families and communities all across our country. Canada will implement their $1.3 billion border plan. As per Prime Minister Trudeau, will be, quote, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. And it goes on to quote Prime Minister Trudeau's statement from there and ends President Trump ending his statement as president. It is my responsibility to ensure the safety of all Americans, and I'm doing just that. I am very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Fairness for all. That from President Trump on social media. Here's what the president had to say earlier about why he targeted one of the U.S.'s top allies.
You know, we're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well. Banks are not, as an example, allowed. Did you know that? That banks, American banks, are not allowed to do business in Canada. Can you believe that? And that's one of many things, and we talked about it, and I think we'll win most of the subjects. But for some reason, a lot of things have been very unfair with Canada. I noticed that in the first term. You deal with people, and after a while you begin to realize, like you learn that Larry Ellison's very tough to do business with, okay? He's a very tough guy. I mean, I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. But Canada is very tough. They're very, very tough to do business with. And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part. They don't take our cars. They make cars, but they basically don't take our cars. And, you know, we don't need, and look, I think we're going to have another good conversation today. We're actually speaking at 3 o'clock again. But we don't need them to make our cars. We don't need them to give us lumber. We don't need them for agricultural products because we have all the agriculture we need. They don't take our agricultural product for the most part, our milk and dairy, etc. A little bit they do, but not much. We take theirs. And as far as cars are concerned, they took in a big percentage, almost 19% of the market. And, you know, I wouldn't mind making our cars in the United States, so we have a problem there. I'd like to make our cars in the U.S. We don't need Canada to make our cars.
President Trump speaking at the White House before the announcement of a pause on new tariffs to Canada for 30 days. Now, on a conference call today, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer also talked about this tariff plan.
If these tariffs go through, they'll be felt everywhere, from your grocery store to the gas pump to local businesses, even your upcoming Super Bowl party. Because, of course, beer and guacamole are two of the biggest things consumed at the Super Bowl party, and they come from Mexico, so it might not happen this year, but it could happen in the future. These nonsense tariffs equate to a tax increase on the American people. And the president isn't just randomly slapping on tariffs. He's slapping consumers right where it hurts, their wallets. And the president's advice is, quote, live with it and be okay with, quote, some pain. What? I didn't hear him say that when he ran. It just to tell people live with pain for something that makes no economic sense is just appalling. Every time tariffs have been implemented without any real economic plan, it's increased prices on consumers and caused inflation. The 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico make 100% no sense. Even more shocking, it was Donald Trump who campaigned on lowering costs, and now it's Donald Trump who will raise them and expects consumers to be okay with that. So here we are now in a trade war with Mexico and Canada. For the American people, it will be a war between prices and their paychecks, and Senate Democrats won't stand for it.
Again, Senator Schumer speaking before the agreement with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on pausing new tariffs towards Canada. Senator Schumer referring to the president's statement on social media about the tariffs. He posted this statement yesterday, quote, will there be some pain? Yes, maybe and maybe not, but we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid. That's the statement that Senator Schumer referring to in that quote from him. You're listening to Washington Today.
Tomorrow on C-SPAN Radio, tune in at 10 a.m. Eastern for the Senate Finance Committee's vote on HHS Secretary nominee Robert Kennedy Jr. And stay tuned for coverage as it happens of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the White House to meet with President Donald Trump. Stay connected to all of C-SPAN's programming anytime at cspan.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today. The Senate started their work week with 3 votes on this afternoon's agenda, one to confirm Christopher Wright to be Energy Secretary and 2 others to advance the nominations of Pam Bondi to be Attorney General and Russell Vought as White House Budget Director. And late word this afternoon from Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins on the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Senator Collins saying in this statement, quote, after extensive consideration of her nomination, I will support Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence. As one of the principal authors of the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, that established this coordinating position. I understand the critical role the DNI plays in the intelligence community. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, however, has become far larger than it was designed to be, and Ms. Gabbard shares my vision of returning the agency to its intended size. In response to my questions during our discussion in my office and at the open hearing, as well as through her explanation at the closed hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee, Ms. Gabbard addressed my concerns regarding her views on Edward Snowden. I look forward to working with Ms. Gabbard to strengthen our national security. So, Senator Susan Collins, the Republican of Maine, announcing her support on the nomination for Tulsi Gabbard to be President Trump's Director of National Intelligence. The House will come back tomorrow at noon Eastern. Members will consider several bills under suspension of the rules, including one requiring the Agriculture and Interior Departments to evaluate the use of new aerial technology to prevent and suppress wildfires, and another to award the 9/11 Memorial Museum in New York City a one-time grant to support its operation, security, and maintenance. Of course, you can see the Senate live on C-SPAN 2, the House on C-SPAN, and get our full congressional coverage on C-SPAN Now and cspan.org. USA Today is reporting today that Elon Musk is now a government employee. The announcement came just hours after he announced his plan to close the USAID on X, the social media platform he owns. The USA Today story says that the president has made Elon Musk a so-called special government employee. It goes on to say, quote, the designation allows him to work for the federal government with or without compensation for a limited amount of time. He also received a government email and office. The USA Today story also says, quote, it is not clear when Musk received the special government employee designation, which allows him to work for the federal government for 130 days over the course of a year without having to publicly disclose his finances. The president was asked about Elon Musk's access today at the White House.
Mr. President, why is it important for Elon Musk to have access to the payment systems at Treasury?
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him. He's a very talented guy from the standpoint of management and costs, and we put him in charge of seeing what he can do with certain groups and certain numbers. Some of the numbers are horrible, what he's found. Think of it, $100 million on condoms to Hamas, and many other things that are frankly even more ridiculous. And they're finding tremendous waste, really waste more than anything else, I think you could say. Probably fraud and abuse can be added to it, the more standard waste, fraud, and abuse. But they're finding tremendous amounts of really bad things, bad spending. You've been writing about some of it, frankly, and some of the things that they've been doing is just terrible. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. But he reports in, and it's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running, obviously, a big company. It has nothing to do, if there's a conflict, that we won't let him get near it. But he does have a good natural instinct. He's got a team of very talented people. We're trying to shrink government, and he can probably shrink it as well as anybody else, if not better. Where we think there's a conflict or there's a problem, we won't let him go near it. But he has some very good ideas, and we have a lot of very other talented people also.
Now, that statement comes after reports that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signed off on a plan to give Elon Musk's team access to the system that handles trillions of dollars in federal payments. Politico.com is reporting that the team is led by Cloud Software Group CEO Tom Krause, and that his role, quote, will be subject to safeguards that would not allow any ability to make changes to the system, and that no one outside Treasury would have access. Senate Budget Committee Ranking Member Patty Murray talked to reporters about that access today.
Some Republicans are trying to suggest that Musk only has viewing access to Treasury's highly sensitive payment system, as if that's acceptable either. But why on earth should we believe that, particularly when he is saying the exact opposite loudly and repeatedly for everyone to see? What funds will Elon target next? Life-saving medical research? Housing assistance? Food banks? We already know he is falsely attacking faith-based organizations that help people and promising to cut off funds based off conspiracy theories. The world's richest man has vowed to cut off funding that helps the least among us? Think about that. And next, think about how many dollars he himself makes from government contracts. And the Trump administration is handing the keys of the Treasury to him. It does not get more blatantly corrupt than that. And let me underscore just how dangerous this is, because now that Trump has handed over Treasury's checkbook, what if Elon decides he doesn't like how Ford is getting federal funds to build an EV battery plant? What's next? All Elon has to do is say, oh, they're woke, and he can convince Trump to illegally cut off those funds. Maybe Elon will decide he doesn't like that Blue Origin and not SpaceX gets a contract, so he wants to gum up the works on their payments. Private corporations and competitors take note. And anyone who thinks that surely won't happen has not been paying attention. Now, make no mistake, Trump and Musk have absolutely zero legal authority to hold up any federal payments that are law. But that has not stopped them so far. This country is still reeling from the chaos of last week's blanket spending freeze, and Trump's illegal EOs to withhold funds are still not yet revoked. Trump and Musk have yet to find a law they think applies to them. That is not how things work in this country.
Senate Budget Committee Ranking Member Patty Murray. News Nation is reporting that a lawsuit was filed today containing the first 7 wrongful death claims filed against Norfolk Southern Railroad. The article states that the lawsuit is in response to the 2023 East Palestine, Ohio train disaster, where officials burned 116,000 gallons of vinyl chloride after the train derailed. It alleges the railroad and its contractors botched the cleanup while EPA and CDC officials signed off on it and failed to adequately warn residents about the health risks. Today is the second anniversary of that derailment. Vice President J.D. Vance was in East Palestine, Ohio. He talked to reporters.
What I did, I came here a couple years ago. I talked to people on the ground. It was kind of crazy. The first person I met was at a gas station. We had to stop and get gas. And I asked her what was going on, and I expected her just to be, it's a small town, but it's not that small of a town. I expected her to be a person who was just generally aware of what was going on. And she actually was living in a house that was over one of the creeks where she was smelling the fumes coming into her house. And I realized that, the most important part sometimes of being a leader is just listening to the people who are on the ground and experiencing this. And that's what I've tried to do. As the governor said, that's what I try to do, talking to local businesses, because it is different now, right? In that initial phase, what we were most worried about is the water clean to drink? Is the air safe to breathe? That's what we were really worried about 2 years ago. Now what we're worried about is finishing the cleanup and getting this community back on the path of economic prosperity. And you asked about the Railway Safety Act. I mean, I sponsored the Railway Safety Act because I thought then, and I still think now, that we could do a lot better. We could have smarter regulations that actually empower the railways to experiment with technology that will make their business safer, but most importantly, make these communities safer. And I think that we could do a lot better at ensuring that when you have a terrible train disaster like what happened in East Palestine, the railways actually pick up the tab. And that is one thing. As much as I'm inspired and gratified by the resiliency of this community, I heard a lot about Norfolk Southern making promises to this community that it didn't keep. And you can be damn sure that over the next 6 months, you're going to hear a lot from the Vice President of the United States and the entire administration. If Norfolk Southern doesn't keep these promises, we are going to talk about it and we are going to fight for it.
Does it bother you right now that the Rail Safety Act is still hung up in Congress? And what is your message to the members of Congress over that legislation?
Well, look, I'm bothered that it wasn't brought up for a vote in the last Congress, because I at least know in the United States Senate we had the votes to pass it. And I think that now that falls, of course, to the United States senators standing behind me. And I know we're thrilled to have Bernie Moreno and John Husted here, but also to the Pennsylvania senators, I think, to actually work that legislation to make it as good as possible and to make it possible for it to come up for a vote in the United States Senate. I do think that is a very viable and a very reasonable goal. I do think that we continue to need to do better at rail safety in this country. And I even talked to the fire chief a little bit. He's got strong views about rail safety, probably how we can make the bill a little bit better, but also how we can make sure that common sense rail safety makes its way into our public laws.
You can see the entire event with the Vice President at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. The News Nation story noted that the Trump administration has yet to sign a disaster declaration for the area. Finally, a couple of in case you missed it's from this weekend. Former Kentucky Republican Senator Mitch McConnell was on 60 Minutes last night. The longest-serving Senate leader in U.S. history warned about the effects tariffs will have on consumer prices. He also said he feels free now that he's not in Senate leadership.
You have said that you feel liberated, like Martin Luther King, free at last.
Yeah,
so,
well, I
free for what? Free to do what?
Well, I will be more outspoken about things that I particularly care about than I have been in the past.
Particularly the resurgence of isolationism in today's Republican Party.
America first, that's what they used in the 30s. And I'm hopeful the new administration will understand and act, not with just language that says America first, but funding that underscores the nature of the threat. Look, what is the situation? North Korea, China, Russia, Iran. This is a huge threat, a fight between the autocrats and the democracies. And when it comes to the democratic world, only one country can lead. That's us.
That's fundamental to the difference between what you're saying and what this administration seems to be saying, which is we don't want to be the leader of the free world anymore.
Well, I can only speak for myself. I think it's dangerous to step aside and assume that by speaking to autocrats, they will somehow treat you better.
What about tariffs against our allies?
It will drive the cost of everything up. In other words, it'll be paid for by American consumers. I mean, why would you want to get in a fight with your allies over this?
What about the encroachment on the independence of the Senate, for example? Will you be speaking out about that?
I sure will. When I was majority leader and he was president, he tried to get me to change the filibuster.
Right.
I said I had a one-word answer, no.
In the book, it says that you had a couple of screaming matches on the phone with the president.
We had a candid relationship, you know.
President Trump called you, among other things, a sullen, unsmiling political hack. You have said some pretty harsh things about him. You've said he's nasty. You said he's not very smart. You said he's a sleazeball.
Well, those were private comments, and
well, but they're in your biography.
Yeah.
Senator McConnell was one of 3 Republican no votes on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's nomination. He did not say how he would vote on nominations of Tulsi Gabbard or Robert F. Kennedy. You can see more at cbsnews.com. Also last night, former President Jimmy Carter won his 4th Grammy Award. He won in the audiobook narration and storytelling category for Last Sundays in Plains, a centennial celebration. Those are recordings of his final Sunday school lessons delivered at Marantha Baptist Church in Georgia. His grandson, Jason Carter, accepted the award. Here's what he had to say after the win.
My grandfather, as we've celebrated him over these last few weeks and months since his passing, it's been a remarkable outpouring of love, and this is another aspect of that. We're thrilled to have captured his words and to have this team put it together in such a beautiful package to hopefully pass on for generations.
Do you think he knew how beloved he was before he passed away?
You know, I think he did. I think one of the remarkable aspects of his life is when he went into hospice for all those years, knowing that he sort of put himself in God's hands, he knew and understood and felt really that outpouring of love for many of those months. And it was one of the great parts for my family to watch him experience that outpouring. And I think ultimately he knew, and he was at peace at the end, and that made it so much easier for us to just celebrate him.
So how much did he want to win that Grammy?
He loves Grammys. Like, this is his third Grammy, and he treasures each and every one. It's one of his most prized possessions are the Grammys that he's won over time. So,
Well, especially because he's such a big music aficionado.
yeah. He loves music. I mean, and Kabir Siegel knew about his love for music. We brought some great artists to participate in this particular album, and so certainly he wishes that he was the musician that some of these folks are, but he certainly is a fan like the rest of us.
Those musicians on the recording include Darius Rucker, Leanne Rimes, and John Batiste. Of course, Jimmy Carter passed away last month at the age of 100. He is the most Grammy-nominated and Grammy-awarded president in history. Reminder, you can get Washington Today as a podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. It's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more of the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum involving you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy. From Washington, D.C. to across the country. Coming up Tuesday morning, Center for Immigration Studies Executive Director Mark Krikorian will talk about the Trump administration's recent deportation actions and broader immigration policy. Greg Cordy of Bloomberg News will talk about Elon Musk's role in recent actions with the Department of Government Efficiency. And Texas Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson, Democratic freshman class president, will talk about her legislative priorities and Democrats' approach to the Trump administration and the Republican Congress. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, or online at cspan.org.